If you ask someone born after the year 2000, "Hey, do you know a game called Prince of Persia?" they will probably say no, which is a real shame because the further back you go from 2000, it's more likely the answer changes to "Yeah, Prince of Persia, they were awesome!" It's funny how a franchise that became synonymous with revolution and quality not once, but twice has fallen into complete oblivion. So today, I encourage you to join me in remembering every step of the journey this saga took, from its humble but successful beginnings to being completely forgotten. Let's go! To return to the origins, we have to go back to 1989, when Jordan Mechner was inspired by adventure movies with acrobatic characters to create a platform and adventure game completely different from Super Mario or Zelda. Prince of Persia looks at platforming in a completely different way that even today we barely find in video games, a style I would like to call realistic platforming. While in Super Mario, whether classic or modern, exaggerated jumps are performed while evading even more exaggerated traps, partially or completely ignoring fall damage, the prince is a normal human, aware that he is risking his life every time he lifts his feet off the ground. The realism is felt in the very animations of our protagonist, copied from the movements that Jordan recorded of his brother. I've only seen this platforming style here and in Tomb Raider, a saga inspired by Prince of Persia. Both here and in Mario, fluidity and chaining multiple jumps are the end goal, but Tomb Raider and Prince of Persia multiply the risks, creating a constant sense of danger. Running can lead to slipping. Jumping without calculating can easily lead to falling short or even overshooting, and any jump where the ground is not close to you can mean certain death. This makes the game seem slow or frustrating from the outside, but for the player, positioning correctly for a single jump is more intense than an entire level of Mario. Not to mention, when the player masters the system, performing multiple chain jumps makes you feel like a god. It's a system that demands caution and patience instead of skill, but then comes a plot twist. Just like Tomb Raider occasionally presents us with time-limited situations where we can't afford to slow down, the entire first installment is a race against time. The evil vizier Jafar has enchanted the princess to fall in love with him. We, the true love of the princess, have been locked away in the deepest dungeons to prevent us from stopping it, and we manage to escape when there is only 1 hour left for the spell to be completed. That's right, you have an hour to complete the game. You find yourself in a constant back and forth of decisions. You must take risks to reach the princess before time runs out, but each death will send you back to the beginning of the level, wasting time, so you want to make sure not to take risks. An apparent contradiction that demands the player to master its systems, creating a fun and exciting game despite its short duration and simplicity. But even within that simplicity, there's more than just simple platforms. There are also one-on-one battles with logic similar to platforming, having to balance a risky offense with a safe defense. And this game is among the first to give us a conflict against a copy of our protagonist, the Prince's Reflection, 2 years before the Dark Knight Cecil's Reflection, and 9 years before the Dark Link from Ocarina of Time. The moment you come face to face with your reflection is the most iconic moment of the game, because despite instinctively drawing your sword, you have to realize that it mimics all your movements. So to overcome the reflection, you simply have to disarm yourself and walk towards it. Absolutely brilliant. This game nowadays is what it is. Little more than short and curious distraction with simple mechanics and barely any story, but when you look closely, you see that it is the father of many modern systems and concepts. Please, the iconic doppelganger from Tomb Raider 1 is a blatant copy of the Prince of Persia's shadow. Prince of Persia 1 is up there with Super Mario, Zelda, and Metroid as one of several games from the late 80s that revived the medium after the Atari disaster. Of course, after its success, there had to be a sequel that would come out 4 years later, Prince of Persia 2, The Shadow and the Flame. It's difficult to talk about this game because it is both very identical and very different from its predecessor. Just 11 days after the events of the first game, our protagonist, now a hero for saving the Sultan's daughter from the evil vizier, refuses to gain fortune as a reward. Instead, he asks to marry the princess, becoming the Prince of Persia. But the damn vizier, who is still alive for some reason no one cut off his head after what he tried in the previous game, casts another spell. This time changing everyone's perception, making them believe he is the prince and our protagonist a beggar. So we are forced to find a way to kill Jafar and lift the curse. Instead of just exploring the palace's dungeons, this adventure takes us to a variety of locations, facing multiple enemies instead of one by one. And it's strange, everything is more, bigger, prettier, more spectacular, more complex, more difficult, but it ends up being less satisfying than the original adventure. This sequel wants to have the same effect as the classic by repeating all its concepts plus trying to multiply them, but it only manages to decrease its enjoyment and effectiveness. Before there were one-on-one duels, now it's against multiple enemies at once. We also return to the reflection, which reappears when our protagonist falls, merging with a magic flame, giving us the power to extract our own soul, our shadow from our body. The moment is cool, but then we face Jafar in the dream world, and this is what I'm trying to explain. They are trying to craft a situation that is 10 times more than the original game. It feels forced, and you end up feeling less emotion than in that very simple original sequence. The game was a success and received positive reviews, but some considered it an inferior work to the original due to its worse level design and how trying to exaggerate everything led to things like an infamous difficulty. What could have been a simple setback turned into a disaster when the third installment, Prince of Persia 3D, was released. This is one of the worst games ever made. The first time I saw it, I thought it was from 94, maybe 95, when 3D games were still rudimentary, little more than prototypes, but nope! It's from 1999. Tomb Raider 1, Super Mario 64, and Resident Evil had been on the market for 3 years. The first two in particular considered as the games that invented 3D in gaming. In some incomprehensible way, this third installment not only arrived late to the party, but it did everything wrong. Everything! With horrible and ugly controls and boring scenarios compared to Tomb Raider. That same year, The Last Revelation came out, considered by many as one of the best, if not the best, Tomb Raider, and this poor installment was supposed to compete with that. Let's see, it had ideas like bringing back the one-on-one duels from the first game, but again, it looked and controlled terrible. This is one of those games that you have to play with friends to laugh, or watch the speedrun of games done quick and again, laugh. After such a disaster, it wouldn't have been a surprise if this franchise had entered a long slumber, but someone saw its potential. Now we look at it with disdain, but at the time, Ubisoft was considered one of the best video game companies and saw the potential of a Prince of Persia in 3 dimensions. How it could reclaim the crown of one of the best video game sagas with the right vision and the right team. They were right. We went from the worst Prince of Persia ever made to the best. I have spoken very highly of the classic, but when people fondly remember Prince of Persia, they are referring to the 2003 game Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. It's hard to explain why this is the best game in the franchise, as it's a combination of many factors, but I'll do my best. The first thing we notice when we put our hands on the controller is that there was a real effort to take the ideas from the original and transmute them into 3 dimensions. If before they were inspired by realistic high-risk movements, let's take it to the next level. The perfectly fluid animations are now inspired by parkour, which is becoming popular at the time, giving us a great variety of fun movements while maintaining the original essence. But maintaining the essence of risk and danger was a problem. How do we make platforming risky and dangerous without it becoming frustrating? Someone had a wonderful idea, as soon our prince steals an object called the Dagger of Time, which allows you to rewind a few seconds in time as long as it has some sand. That is to say, it doesn't matter if you mess up and fall into an abyss, you can rewind time with a really cool effect, turning fatal failures into mere stumbles. But of course, if you ran out of sand, you'll die for real and have to go back to the last checkpoint. This idea is absolutely brilliant. You can make the platforming difficult, even unfair at times, by giving the player a tool that allows them to correct their mistakes. Shortly after, the evil vizier, yes, again, tricks the prince into using the dagger to open the sands of time, causing an apocalypse that turns everyone except 3 people into sand monsters. The vizier, protected by his staff, who wishes to use this power to conquer the world, the prince, protected by the dagger, and Farah, the Maharaja's daughter, protected by a medallion. This marks the course of almost the entire game, in which we must advance, sometimes alone, sometimes alongside Farah, to the top of the palace to seal the sands of time and go back in time to fix all the damage caused. From the beginning, you have access to almost all the tools you will use throughout the game, which gradually but constantly becomes more difficult. Its gameplay is quite simplistic compared to other games of the time and the sequels, but it's still very fun today despite some odd things like, why do we have to watch the prince sheath his weapons every time he finishes a fight? Or, why the hell did you put birds as enemies in a game without ranged weapons? I have to stay down here like an idiot until they decide to eat my eyes, and even then, when they get close, I might only land in singular pathetic slash. However, what truly gives the installment its great value and the title of the best game in the franchise is its story. The plot of the Classic Trilogy was merely an excuse, but here, the prince and Farah are the heart of the game. When they meet, they can't stand each other, both arrogant, unable to show vulnerability due to their egos. But little by little, they get to know each other. Their dialogues and interactions are entertaining, and by the time you get close to the end, it is not only obvious that they have fallen in love despite their negative traits, but they also encourage and comfort each other, giving themselves strength to overcome the terrifying apocalypse they are trapped in. The union between these two characters is considered one of the best romance stories in gaming. 22 years have passed since its release, and teams of writers giving it their all to create huge dramas rarely surpass this simple and adorable romance. The game goes all out in the ending, where the prince, despite everything, despite his love, the constant visions he has of the future make him doubt Farah, and he fails. He doesn't manage to seal the sands. After reaching the top of the palace, they fall to the depths, and we have a strange psychedelic sequence, a spiritual moment. Like the reflection of the first game, but without falling into a crude imitation or an exaggeration like the sequel. There is something magical about how this game handles the supernatural. This sequence is the biggest moment, but for example, if we explore, we can find alternate paths that take us to another dimension, where we can drink strange water that returns us to the real world strengthened, with a longer life bar and the passage we just traversed sealed off, as if it never existed. The game could have simply hidden life gems and that's it, but no, they put in the effort. Or the save points, which are concentrations of the released sense of time that we can use to see the future. While we save the game, the prince sees future events, which leads to consequences in the game's story. They could have just been save points, but no, there is an effort to make everything special, and they succeeded. Back to where we were. After the final spiritual sequence, the prince wakes up discovering that Farah has stolen the dagger and is preparing to confront the vizier and seal the sands alone. A certain death. The final level is a long ascent up the palace walls with the dawn in the background without our dagger. For the first time since the beginning of the game, each jump is a deadly risk. This final rush is accompanied by the best song in the game, The Tower of Dawn. I've talked about this because it's my favorite moment in the franchise. I also don't want to say too many spoilers. I would like you to play this game yourselves. You can easily emulate it! So I'll just say that there's a good final confrontation and the game ends on a bittersweet note. Leaning towards the sweet but bittersweet. The prince seals the sands and returns to the past where he kills the vizier before he has time to execute his plan. But of course, this means that his romance with Farah never happened. Despite having, in a way, lost his beloved, the prince lives happily, for he has learned courage, kindness, and humility on his journey. And he trusts that he will be able to win Farah's heart again in the future. Although the game sold strangely little in North America for a time, it was a huge success in Europe, and even had an unusual success in Japan for a Western game. Prince of Persia had made a grand comeback, beloved by everyone who played it and receiving multiple awards, including the title of Game of the Year 2003 at E3. The famous Assassin's Creed originated as a sequel to Prince of Persia before becoming its own franchise. As happened with the classic, a game of such success couldn't just end there. There had to be a sequel. Just a year later, Prince of Persia Warrior Within was released. I love this game, but I'm going to start with a criticism, okay? To get it out of the way. Back in the 90s, the dark and edgy trend had already started, and in the early 2000s, it began to affect video games as well. Some idiots ignore Prince of Persia for being colorful and a love story. Someone listened to those idiots and decided to change the setting and the theme. Well, once the game progresses a bit, it's not that different from its predecessor, but the first few minutes are fascinating how they want to distance themselves from the setting of the first installment. which, by the way, began with our prince infiltrating a castle during a war. It wasn't a very pleasant theme either, but since it was daytime and they didn't use swear words, it seems it wasn't edgy enough. Warrior Within begins with sword clashes surrounded by war and death during a nighttime storm while rock music plays, and I don't know what I expected when I started the game, but I certainly didn't expect one of the prince's first words to be shouting, "Bitch!"
Bitch!
After this beginning, things relax and we can see the mechanical evolution. Parkour and rewinding time are maintained with a couple of added moves and terrifying sequences where the Dahaka, an immortal demon, chases us, forcing us to flee for our lives. Some of these chases are among the best moments of the game. The combat, which was one of the worst aspects of the previous game, was expanded in very good ways. Now, instead of being forced to always carry the Dagger of Time, we have our main weapon and a secondary weapon that will break over time, whether they are basic weapons we take from our enemies or special weapons that we can only find if we explore every nook and cranny of this island. That's another thing, instead of following a linear progression, although there is an exact sequence of events we must follow to complete the story, we have access to the entire island at once, allowing us to explore alternate paths and find secrets. Not only did we have the entire island, in a way we had two islands as we can travel between the past and the present in various locations, switching from the present ruined island to the radiant garden it used to be. These journeys are used both for exploration and to solve some puzzles. Sometimes it complicates how to progress too much, but it's still cool. Overall, this is a game that is more enjoyable to play than the previous installment. I have chosen these words very carefully. If you ask me which is my favorite Prince of Persia, I would probably say this one, because it's the one I enjoy playing the most, the one I find better made mechanically as a game. But I can't deny that it doesn't reach that special je ne sais quoi of the first one. When I finished that game, I feel like I have lived a great story, a great adventure. Here, I had a good time, but I don't have that inner satisfaction. What I'm trying to say is, this is a better game, but the sense of time is a better work of art. Don't get me wrong, this one also has its moments, like everything about the Sand Wraith, which is excellent and another brilliant way to realize the idea of reflection and shadow, which again, I don't want to spoil. In general, the reviews were mixed, leaning towards positive. Many adored the game, but the abrupt shift to an edgy tone, a simple story with uninteresting characters, was heavily criticized after the huge success of The Prince and Farah in the first installment. Even Jordan Mechner, the original creator who worked on The Sands of Time but not on this one, commented that he didn't like these changes at all, although I haven't seen him complain about the gameplay. Director Guyot admitted that in wanting to make the game a bit darker, they went a little overboard. I quoted, "Exactly, and I find that a little very funny. We got a little carried away." But hey, the game was a success. They criticized what needed to be criticized, and after that, you had a good game worthy of being a sequel of the masterpiece that was The Sands of Time. And after two successes, it's impossible for them to mess it up again with a bad third game like they did with the Classic Trilogy. Right? Right? Let's see, the end of the trilogy, The Two Thrones, it's not a bad game, nor is it anywhere near as horrible as Prince of Persia 3D, please, but it is, without a doubt, the weakest of the three, and messing it up at the end is a huge bummer. When you have a trilogy, the first and the third are the most important. If you mess up the first one, there won't even be a trilogy. If you mess up the second one, it's bad. But you still have the success of the first and you can make up for it with the third to end on a good note. But if after two successes you mess up right at the end, you ruin all the past work. I wonder to what extent this caused all the strange decisions made in the franchise since this installment, but that will come later. First, we have to try to see what happened here. The goal was obvious, to create a game that had all the good from the first two games and none of the bad. The aesthetics and story of the first game with the mechanical evolution and internal conflict of the second. Sounds good, sounds fucking great, which makes the quality of this game even more inexplicable. The aesthetics are cool, but they don't reach the beauty of the first game. It even falls short compared to the second one, which used time travel to present the same place in two very different ways. The story is a mess. They kill off a character from the second game right away and repeat the same situation as in the first game. The evil vizier unleashes the Sands of Time and causes the apocalypse. We have to reach the top of his palace to end blah 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 blah. Even Farah is here again, which is a good idea because the prince is still in love with her, but she doesn't know him. It could have been a very interesting dynamic, but the quality of the script and the characters is almost non-existent compared to the original game. From the best romance in gaming to two characters that don't matter to you at all. It's so sad. The only thing that saves the story is the Dark Prince. While it may seem like another attempt to be edgy, this entity that represents the dark side of the prince is very well done. In the first game, the prince sometimes narrated when he was alone and constantly talked to Farah when he was with her. Here, we are almost always alone, but the Dark Prince constantly speaks to us, personifying the negative facets of the prince. It's not so much a dark side, but once again, his shadow, trying to encourage him to flee and abandon others to their fate to save himself, to discard his love for Farah to stop suffering. It's a very good personification of how someone's bad thoughts are. The final confrontations against this dark side were the only times I felt something in this story. Normally, you have to use water to purify the transformation, but the last time, where there is no water, the prince manages to reverse the transformation through sheer willpower, having found arguments that disarm those of his shadow. And, after defeating the vizier, the true final battle is against the Dark Prince, who mocks us and confronts us with an endless army of shadows. But, as we did in 1989, the solution lies not in fighting, but in walking away. By shedding hatred, both toward others and ourselves, our shadow has nothing to attack us with.
No! What are you doing? Do not ignore me! Do not leave me behind!
It's a real shame that these great moments become small within their context of lower quality. Mechanically, the same thing happens. Great ideas end up feeling insignificant. I thought the transformation to Dark Prince would be brilliant. From the beginning, in these games, the combat was less fun than the platforming. So justifying a more God of War-like combat sounds great, but for some reason, there are many sequences of the Dark Prince that are platforming, and we will have to fight with the normal prince's inferior moves much more than with the Dark Prince. And now there's also stealth, which is shit. It's a sequence of infamously difficult QuickTime events. I understand. It's difficult for you to use the sense of time when you mess up, like in the platforming, but here it's just absurd. Not to mention the horse races, unnecessary and a pain to control. This game is sad. There's no other way to put it. Prince of Persia 3D was all crap, so you laugh and you let it go. But this game has so many good ideas. But it doesn't matter how good the ideas are if the execution is bad. And this game is full of bad executions. I insist that it's not a bad game, but after two great games, for this to be the grand finale of the story is a kick in the teeth. Curiously, the reviews were positive, which I find very strange because although I see and enjoy everything this game has to offer, it is obviously much inferior to Sense of Time and Warrior Within. Someone at Ubisoft agreed with me, and unfortunately, that led them to make a terrible decision. To make a fucking reboot. Technically speaking, the Sense of Time trilogy was already a reboot by changing the story and protagonist, but the classics were very old games with extremely simple narratives and characters. The new trilogy was not considered a reboot, it was simply considered new. But the Prince of Persia period that came out in 2008 was announced from the very beginning as a new beginning. Stupid decision, because if the intention was to make people forget the third installment, it sent the message that they also wanted to forget the other two beloved games, so this reboot was born with a wound before it could take its first steps. To begin with, the first question everyone asks is, why is it still called Prince of Persia if the protagonist is not the Prince of Persia? He became the Prince of Persia after the classic game, that's why it was called Prince of Persia, and he was the Prince of Persia in the Sands of Time trilogy. But here, it's a random guy who instead of saying his name, calls himself Prince as a mockery, showing how despite being a nobody, he considers himself superior to everyone. This is a stretch. I remember an interview where one of the developers said that this decision was made because it was difficult to create stories where the protagonist is part of the royalty. The general reaction from the audience to this was, "You're an idiot." But anyway, speaking of the game itself, it can't be denied that they were looking for something new because, damn, not only is the game very different from the ones we've just seen, this game is different in general. Well, the plot is similar to the Sands of Time. There's an evil god who unleashes the apocalypse. You and the girl, Elika, must stop him and you fall in love during the journey. But that's where the similarities end. Unlike the Prince and Farah, Elika and you are together throughout the entire journey, and all the game mechanics are based on the duo, taking advantage of Elika's light powers. Where the game stands out the most is in the platforming. Not only is it still as enjoyable as the classics, but now there are segments where you must use your powers, increasing the quality and variety of the jumps. But, and I feel a bit sad to have to mention it so soon because I wanted to be positive at the beginning, in this game, you can't die. This decision is shit. Look, I can imagine a game where you can't die that is good, but this is not one of those. When you fall into the void, or a trap, or you get hit by an enemy, Elika, who can fly, saves you, and you return to the last place you set foot on solid ground. That is to say, you can mess up as many times as you want and there are no consequences. The previous games had the perfect balance. You could save yourself by rewinding time, which also looks super cool, but you had a limited amount of sand. Mess up too many times and you'll have to repeat the entire segment. Simple, concise, effective. Removing the consequences takes away the risk and almost completely eliminates the challenge. Just with this, much of what made both the previous trilogy and the original game special has completely disappeared. The battles have also changed a lot. Now they are one-on-one duels again. According to the developers, the intention was for them to imitate the fighting genre, but they messed up. The system of the previous trilogy was not perfect, far from it. The combat was undoubtedly the worst part of those games. But the solution was not this strange back and forth that feels uncomfortable and limited, with quick time events every now and then, as we were in the era when they were popular. I'm glad they experimented, there's something here, but this system still needed a lot of work. All the fights feel the same and clunky, it ends up being boring. It's a shame because the game has many good things. It looks incredible with that Okami art style. You can complete the 4 main phases in any order. When you finish them, you purify them and traverse the level empty of traps but full of collectibles. It has perhaps the second best story in the entire franchise, third best in my humble opinion. The relationship between the Prince and Elika is not as good as that of the Prince and Farah, but it gets close, culminating in the ending, which many hated but I find very good. Elika sacrifices herself to seal Ahriman once and for all, but the Prince, in love and in pain, cuts down the tree of life to resurrect her, releasing Ahriman once again, leaving us with a super fucked up ending where not only have we solved nothing, but the Prince has earned Elika's hatred by denying her sacrifice. It's dark, and if there had been a sequel, the story would have probably ended in a more satisfying way, but since there was no sequel, that's how it all ends. What do you mean there was a sequel? Well, for the damn Nintendo DS, they released the continuation of the plot, Prince of Persia: The Fallen King, in which the prince, without a princess, because she told him to fuck off, goes to find someone capable of helping against the corruption of Ahriman. The prince becomes friends with a wizard who is semi-corrupted and you collaborate with him, sometimes also facing him when the corruption takes over his mind. It's not a bad game, but it's too long for how repetitive it is. And although the touchscreen controls aren't as bad as other games, it's not as enjoyable as playing with buttons like it should be. And for a sequel, it's fascinating how little it does. The prince becomes friends with a wizard and in the end they do the fusion dance to take down a monster. No, seriously, they fuse, it's actually pretty cool. Then the wizard dies and the game ends exactly as it began, with the prince alone looking for someone capable of helping against the corruption of Ahriman. I wanted to mention this because it's the only thing that came out of the reboot apart from the main game. The reviews were good and the game sold, but it left this bad taste in the audience. They got angry that they tried to change something that didn't need changing. Especially when many of its mechanics, like needing to get collectibles to unlock the powers that unlock the next stages, it felt very experimental. It wasn't all there yet. Even the Two Thrones, the worst game of the previous trilogy, was good. So what was all this about? In the end, it didn't matter, because we returned to the canon of the previous trilogy with the next installment, The Forgotten Sands, which was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if what they wanted was a bad game to justify the excuse to make a reboot, they got it! Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands is a kick in the teeth like few others. They set aside the reboot and announced that the next game will return to the Sands of Time era with an interquel between the first and second installments. The idea isn't bad. We would have all preferred a continuation or even a separate game like the Reboot, but with mechanics and narrative more similar to the trilogy. But hey, this is also good. This game could even be used to explain in more detail the change the prince undergoes between those two games, separated by 7 years in the canon. But the game is... The platforming is the only thing that kind of stands out, and even that is much slower and boring than in the classic games. The fights, for some reason they felt the need to add more combat to a saga where the combat was always the worst part, and somehow they made it even worse. Instead of having 3 or 4 enemies, there are 27 and you dispatch them by mashing 2 buttons while wondering why you're playing this. Making me miss the combat from the Sands of Time is insane. And the story is extremely basic. I could keep complaining and complaining, but what's the point? The summary is that this game, which was supposed to bring Prince of Persia back to the forefront, is the worst in the series since Prince of Persia 3D. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that there wasn't just one game called Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. There were 4 games called Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. Despite sharing the exact same title and cover, these 4 games are completely different mechanically and narratively. The version I was talking about is the one for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. The most famous, the one that was most advertised, and for some reason, the worst. The Nintendo DS and PSP versions are what you might expect. It was common at the time to have adaptations of your big games for handhelds, although it wasn't so common for them to be different games with different stories. I haven't played these two, although I'm curious, maybe someday. The anomaly is the Wii version. It was also normal at the time for your PlayStation 3 and Xbox games to have smaller versions on Wii due to its lower power. Versions that ended up being quite different, but they were still the same game. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed on PlayStation 3, Xbox, and PC was different from the PlayStation 2 and Wii versions, with different mechanics and some different levels, but it was still the same game with the same plot. Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands on Wii not only has nothing to do with the main version, but it is also one of the best games in the franchise. They achieved something in 2010 that some see today as impossible. A good Prince of Persia that draws from the Sands of Time trilogy while simultaneously offering something new. Narratively, instead of the prince and a princess, we see the story of a prince and a genie, Zara. The prince wished to possess a kingdom even greater than his father's, and the fairy granted the prince the gift of immortality, for only the immortals can see the magical kingdom of Ittahar. But, as is often the case with the Fae, their wishes come with a catch. The kingdom is dominated by a dark plan that corrupts and enslaves everything it touches, the Haoma. Zara has used the prince's wish to manipulate him into saving the kingdom. After all, he wouldn't want a kingdom he can't rule. They must move forward to find a way to destroy the Haoma. During the journey, the prince begins annoyed and frustrated by the deception, as well as disgusted by the state of the kingdom he considers his property. But, little by little, as he talks with Zara, who tells him how everything used to be before the Haoma, he starts to see it through her eyes, as a magical land that used to be full of life and joy. The connection between these two is evident in how they address each other. At first, he calls her Genie, and she calls him Prince. When they start to connect, he calls her Zara, and she calls him My Prince. I don't want to spoil the game. It's very good and it's worth experiencing for yourselves. Trust me when I say that the ending is great. Mechanically, it is also very fun. Instead of having time powers like in the Sands trilogy, which yes, means we can rewind time, we have light powers that take advantage of being on the Wii. Before talking about that, I must mention the immortality thing, because someone might hear that and think it's like the Reboot, where you are literally immortal and can't die. No, like in the Sands trilogy, you have sand. As long as you have it, dying will immediately send you to the last safe place you stood, which in the end was what you did with the power to rewind time. And if you run out of sand, you respawn at the last water source you touch, which function as checkpoints. That is, just like how the games in that trilogy used to be. None of that Reboot crap. The powers that differentiate this trilogy are the ability to point the Wii at walls and floors to create magical handles or cyclones. The handles allow us to grip even flat walls, and the cyclones let us reach great heights from the ground or slow a lethal fall. It may not sound like much, but when you realize that you can create grips on any wall in the game and booster cyclones on any floor in the game, the possibilities for how to overcome each platforming challenge increase exponentially, creating super fun segments. By the time you reach the final level, you're traversing practically empty scenarios, creating your own platforms as you progress. It's very fun. The combat remains the game's weak point, but it's not as insulting as its other version. It has its charm. Each enemy is unique and has certain strengths and weaknesses. I would say the combat is more or less as good as that of Warrior Within, if not slightly better. Overall, I find this game brilliant. It's like Warrior Within. I think the Sands of Time is still a superior work of art, but this one is more fun to play. So quickly, this will be my ranking of the franchise. But this only exacerbates what I was saying before. If this version of the game is so good, why the hell was the shitty version the main one? When you ask most fans what they think of the Forgotten Sands, they tell you it's shit, and the few who dare to try the Wii version years later, after hearing from some random angry idiot like me that it was a different game, always discover with wonder that there was a very good Prince of Persia game out there and they had no idea. It's fascinating. I think I've never seen a company shoot itself in the foot in such a direct way. I can't even express it better than a direct description of the sequence of events. 1. We release 2 different games at the same time with the same name and cover so that people think they are the same. 2. We highlight and advertise the shitty game, losing money and earning the disdain and rejection of the fans, despite having made a game that would earn us money and win the fans' affection. 3. We make no effort to advertise the good game or port it to other consoles, ensuring it never leaves the Wii and no one knows about it. 4. We eat shit and cry while we wonder why our games don't sell. It's fucking fascinating, and this caused that despite releasing one of the best Prince of Persia games, the saga entered a great drought, during which there was nothing for 14 years. 14 years in which the young generation has no fucking idea what Prince of Persia is, while the old one screams to the heavens, begging for the return of their beloved prince. And this led us to the stupid, because there's no other better word to describe it, stupid blunder they made 14 years later, in 2024. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a very good game. I haven't played it, but I don't need to. You can tell just by looking at it. Look at that Metroidvania with superpowers, it looks incredible. But many made the same decision as me and haven't bought it. At least I can make the excuse that I don't really like 2D platformers, but the rest of the audience, why haven't they played it? This great game ended up being a sales failure and the team that created it has disbanded. Why hasn't anyone played it? The answer is so damn simple that it's going to give me an aneurysm trying to understand how I can see it, but the executives in charge can't. It comes in 2 parts. That's it! They are interconnected. Starting with the first one, we are going to walk backwards into the past until the last very good Prince of Persia game. We see 2010 with the fucking shit of the Forgotten Sands on PlayStation 3. Then 2008 with a reboot that no one asked for. Then 2005 with a disappointing finale. And finally we reach 2004, Warrior Within, the last great Prince of Persia. 2004. 20 years passed between the release of Warrior Within and The Lost Crown. 20 years in which Prince of Persia games were bad, weird, or both. 20 years of watching as Prince of Persia fell into oblivion, while Assassin's Creed lifted Ubisoft to the heavens and later dragged it to hell with the same speed and intensity. For 20 years, fans fantasized about the return of Prince of Persia with a 3D parkour game where you could rewind time while exploring a beautiful 3D environment. 3D! Like Final Fantasy fans, Prince of Persia fans had to endure a tremendous gaslighting. They were told they didn't want another Prince of Persia because they didn't like the reboot, when they didn't like it because it was too different from what they wanted at the time. They were told they didn't want another Prince of Persia similar to the Sands of Time trilogy, but they released another Prince of Persia from that trilogy and they didn't like it, when they didn't like it because it was a fucking piece of shit game that resembled those masterpieces as much as a shoe resembles a tree. A 3D parkour game where you can rewind time while exploring a beautiful 3D environment. Take that sentence, throw in a couple of mystical sequences, maybe some tough demon like the Dahaga, and that's it. You have the fans in your pocket, but for some reason, they refuse to do that. Suddenly, in 2020, they announced a remake of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, and everyone stood up to applaud because the Prince of Persia had finally returned. This great saga that was once the best in video games was going to be revived. The remake was postponed, then cancelled, then they say the cancellation was a joke, and now they say it will be released in 2026. For now, I'm going to choose not to believe it. And after such a huge disappointment, they announced the next Prince of Persia, a 2D game. It's unfair, I know. It's unfair to judge so superficially something that so many have worked so hard on, but that's how things are. In the mind of most of the fans, Prince of Persia is like this. And we want something like this with modern graphics and controls. So suddenly, seeing something like this is a whiplash and feels like an insult. Once again, we are denied what we want. They deny us a release based on the iconic trilogy to give us something different. We ask for an apple and they give us a banana, which, hey, in this case, the banana is amazing, it's fantastic, and for those who want a banana, great, but we asked for an apple, which again I understand. When they say, let's go back to the origins of Prince of Persia, they mean, let's go back to the 2D of the first game. But, dude, it came out in 1989 on a computer called Apple II. The people who played that game when they were kids are now 55 years old. You are not going to get almost anyone to buy your new Prince of Persia out of nostalgia when half of those people have stopped playing games and the other half are dead. When people talk nostalgically about Prince of Persia, the people who would rush to buy a new installment, they are talking about the 3D games that came out on the PlayStation 2, which was also a few years ago, but not that many. And connected to that, the second thing, the unnecessary redesign of the prince. Yes, I am convinced that this is 50% of the reason why this game hasn't sold. Because, again, in people's minds, the prince looks like this. In fact, the design of Warrior Within was so well liked that it was reused in the Forgotten Sands and even in the movie, which I haven't mentioned until now because it wasn't relevant. For being a film adaptation of a video game, it was good. It wasn't a big deal, but it was fine. It wasn't Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life, what a shit show. Nothing defines the hatred for the redesign better than the damn hairstyle. I curse Killmonger and the mother who gave birth to him. He's a great character, but he popularized that hairstyle. And several suited gentlemen somewhere are convinced that black people have to have that hairstyle to sell games when we're tired of seeing it. Miles Morales looked great, then came Spider-Man 2, boom, Killmonger. Eddie Gordo, adored by fans from day one with a design and fighting style that captivated many. Then Tekken 8 arrived, boom, Killmonger. This damn hairstyle is the black equivalent of the broccoli hairstyle that became popular a few years ago. I've been making fun of the hairstyle because honestly, I needed to get it off my chest. The summary is simple. People saw the cover and said, that's the Prince of Persia? No, this is the Prince of Persia. That's not the Prince of Persia, and I'm not going to buy that game. Which again, the game is good. But because of these stupid decisions, many people won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I just can't anymore. It's as if they want to fail, as if they want to lose money. I mean, the third installment of a trilogy that works like a charm performs a bit worse, so we change everything in a reboot so different that it causes rejection. Then we make a bad game that is part of the trilogy only in name, which, hey, we have made a good game without even being part of the trilogy they love so much, but we hide it on the Wii, while we advertise the PlayStation 3 and Xbox version because for some reason we want them to look at the shitty game instead of the good game. And after 14 years without releasing a single game while we turn Assassin's Creed into a pile of absolute misery. 14 years of fans begging for a Prince of Persia that at least resembles in style, gameplay and plot to the best of the franchise. Then we release a fucking 2D game starring Killmonger. Because we like to do things wrong and get no money. It's just a game. It's just a game. There's no reason to get— Of course there are reasons to get mad! This is the masterpiece, and they're killing it making absurdly stupid decisions. And why? I don't know. That's the worst part. I don't know why they're stupid! I'm tired. I know that working in this industry is difficult and that if I got involved, I would also make mistakes. But this seems so simple, the answer so obvious, and Ubisoft's ignorance so severe that I just can't understand it. We want another one like The Sands of Time. This. No, we want another one like The Sands of Time. Of course, like this. No, you put that in the timeline of The Sands of Time, but it's not like The Sands of Time. Like this. No, this doesn't even look like it. You've done the same thing 3 times in a row for 16 years? I could start screaming and getting desperate again because what is this? In the end, I haven't even talked about the Lost Crown itself. Why bother? Those who have played it know it's a good game, and those who haven't either aren't interested in the genre or are frustrated with Ubisoft, which in my case is both. In the end, that game has become the icing on the funeral cake. Its title, The Lost Crown, seems like a mockery of the franchise itself, which was once crowned as one of the best video game sagas. If anyone knows anyone who works at Ubisoft, put them My Existential Crisis on loop until they understand that we want another Prince of Persia like The Sands of Time or Warrior Within, which is funny, because despite how much I've been a pain in the ass about it, it's not even necessary. The Forgotten Sands on the Wii was a great game without necessarily being another one from the trilogy, but they insisted— No, I'm not going to start the loop again. I should stop talking about this while I can. I'm going to relax. Until next time.